Welcome to the Do Good X podcast, a sanctuary from the entrepreneur grind. Hosts Kimberly Danielle and Stephen Lewis, advocates for impactful entrepreneurship, guide you on the path where purpose meets business. Join us to slow down, reconnect, and explore the challenges of under-resourced entrepreneurs, uncovering the unique journey of building businesses that make a difference. Now, your host.
Welcome, everyone, to the Do Good X podcast. My name is Kimberly Danielle, and I am a community builder, a communication strategist, and a coach who comes from generations of faith-driven leaders and entrepreneurs who believe that our purpose should drive us to contribute to the common good. It is good to be with you, Stephen. It's good to be with you all who are joining us again. And you first-time listeners, thank you for being present. And Stephen, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself and share who we have the pleasure of chatting with in this episode.
Yes, Kimberly, it's good to be with you. I am a catalyst for positive change in communities and business. For over 2 decades, I've inspired leaders and entrepreneurs to live and work on purpose with intention, faith, and a commitment to their well-being. And I am excited today, Kimberly, because we have with us Victor Koo. Victor focuses on inner purpose and social services and investing. In late 2016, Victor co-founded Tianren Culture, a next generation social platform that serves as a catalyst and enabler of social innovation with the mission to foster positive global values and lifestyle. Tianren's Culture core strategic focus is to promote one wisdom, one health, by encouraging and enabling wisdom and service via contemplative practices and healthy lifestyles, especially for those with Eastern roots, believing that the physical, mental, and the emotional, spiritual health and well-being of humans are interconnected with the broader environment and ecosystem. Now, Victor's professional experience is mostly at the intersection of technology in the media sector, as well as private equity and venture capital investment. In 2005, he founded Hai Holdings, which incubated Yoku in 2006. Victor led Yoku as a chairman and CEO to become a leading multi-screen media and entertainment company in China. And Yoku was listed on the New York Stock Exchange in 2010 and in 2016 and completed its privatization and merged with Alibaba Entertainment. Victor now serves as the chairman of Hai Holdings, which currently focus on disruptive innovation and social impact investment areas such as health, genome, and new protein. He is also a senior advisor of Texas Pacific Group and a business advisor to DeChain Capital. Victor received his MBA from Stanford Graduate School of Business, where he currently serves on the advisory council. Victor, it is so good to have you with us today.
Thank you, Stephen. And also thank you, Kimberly. It's a pleasure to be here. And I'd like to preface my comments by saying that I came back to Tokyo recently from the Bay Area and still a little bit jet lagged. So hopefully my comments today will be coherent and clear enough for your understanding.
Well, thank you for joining us in the midst of that and all the way from Tokyo.
Yes. So Victor, let's jump in. You previously shared on a podcast about your earlier business experience in tech, media, finance, and how you shifted to a focus on health and wellness and consciousness. And you share that you sometimes call this the dark side, but also that tech, media, and finance are not inherently good or evil, that they can be used for either. So how do you believe businesses, regardless of their industry, can truly contribute to positive social change, leveraging tech, media, and finance?
Thank you, Stephen. That's quite a complex question. We have to look at it in a couple different directions. I think the first, you have to really start off from a business standpoint, looking at its mission and vision. I think positive social change should really be the part of a company's or business's founding intention and the DNA from the very beginning. Like you said, the last startup I was involved in the private sector is an online video platform that distributes and produces content. The mission our team decided on is sharing joy, wisdom, and heart. For example, the web-based original content strategy that we started around 2008, 2009, were all designed with this mission in mind. So the first thing is you got to really design with positive social change. Secondly, I say that it's a social-minded core team where you have clear responsibility to not just the investors, but also other constituencies and the broader community. Make sure that you do no harm, consider all the externalities and unintended consequences, whether in terms of the product service you deliver at the workplace with your team, as well as also your supply chain as well. Because nowadays, a lot of supply chain covers the world. And it's sometimes quite hard to track all these different suppliers, for example, in terms of its social responsibility. Now, these rules apply across all different sectors, but I think when you look at social industries or social sectors like health, education, food, for example, that is something that those elements I just explained becomes even more important because it really directly impacts people's lives. Now, on the other hand, you've got high-risk sectors like oil and gas and military that almost you want these kinds of companies to really be responsible about tempering their efforts and making sure that they slowly wind down if that's or kind of really reform into different kinds of sectors in terms of long-term mission for the planet. So those are some thoughts, but it's important to monitor the progress and as well as the process, even though you have the right intentions, the right team, as well as really thinking about and all the aspects I mentioned.
I see. Yeah, that's good.
Victor, can you take us back to the moment or the experience that inspired you to launch Tianren Culture and to really center your work on health, wellness, and consciousness?
Thanks, Kimberly. As Stephen described, actually, most of my prior experiences before Tianren Culture has been startups and venture capital in the private sector. So the formative period of Tianren Culture was more, I guess, a process of emergence, not really an impulse or a moment in my own social service journey. The original intention is to address social issues related to health and wellness, which is a sector that, frankly, I did not have much prior experience. So we started with a scoping study that first explored physical health and wellness that took just over a year before we launched into our pilot projects. And the incubation of a working group that have various like-minded funders around the world. Subsequently, we really spent another year and a half maybe on looking at the inner aspects such as mental, emotional, and spiritual wellness, which included for example, reviewing the scientific and social science research done to date on contemplative wisdom and practices, NGOs and funders in the ecosystem, online and offline delivery platforms. And currently, we're still looking at different spiritual and practice teachers around the world. But we've already launched a series of pilot projects in these areas already. So as you can see, it wasn't really a point in time. It was a process, almost a very, very long process as we learn and really hone in the strategy as well as really the approach. I think I would summarize that you really start to have the right intentions. And through the scoping process, we managed to identify a lot of really, really world-class partners around the world with great hearts and souls. And I guess now with the process as we go into these pilot projects, for One Wisdom and One Health that's been around longer, that's already in kind of full blown kind of mode already, that you need to really monitor progress to make sure you make adjustments along the way so you're still consistent to your mission and vision, but at the same time keep fine tuning and improving really the path towards positive social progress.
I have a follow-up question. So, I heard you say that you didn't have experience in the wellness space prior to launching this particular business. And for entrepreneurs who are starting businesses in which they don't have a background in or knowledge of, what do you think that they should be mindful of, or what tips do you have for them? Because you had a long scoping process and really developing this. And so I think that you probably have some valuable insights to share with folks.
What's interesting, Kimberly, is that a lot of things we learn in the private sector may not be helpful, and sometimes it's almost counterproductive in the public sector. And I realized over time that you have to unlearn a lot of the habits to be too results oriented. For example, I know the social world talks about things like impact, about results, about measurement, and that was almost an initial hypothesis. But working with great partners like, Stephen, you also know Service Space, and as well as other partners like that, you come to realize in the social sector, because it's actually a lot more complex rather than the private sector, and that there are a lot of nuances and a lot of things that can emerge that take you by surprise. And so while you have the right seed, like you're planting a tree, right intention, you're putting in the right nutrients and so forth, but the outcome is actually sometimes quite unexpected and unintended. And that's why a lot of the rules in the private sector actually don't really apply.
Well, let me ask you this. What are your thoughts about the potential of technology to drive positive social change? And how is Tianren Culture leveraging technology or even generative AI to enhance its social impact efforts?
Well, the areas I was involved in the private sector, including technology and as well as media and finance, they're really enablers. They're almost magnifiers and accelerators. That's a way to think about it. So while I kid around, like you said, it's the dark side. Really, inherently, I think, it's really hard to figure out whether it's dark or light if you really don't look at the intentions and really the path that you're taking. But you have asked about technology. If your seed and your intention is positive, technology can help you enable, as well as accelerate and magnifies, as I mentioned before. Let me give you an example. Like, as part of our One Wisdom efforts on encouraging contemplative wisdom and practices, we're working on a generative AI project called Compassion GPT with a great partner, Service Space. So we're supporting this amazing social service platform called Service Space that's been among other things, really providing technological tools to the social sector for about 25 years now. So the idea is to build a companion and source of information for those that are interested in finding out more about this important area of going inside for inner work as well as inner transformation. Everyone's probably familiar with ChatGPT by now. That's what it's called a LLM, or a large language model. So the comparison, I guess, in the search world would be a Google, which searches the entire web and basically indexes it. And ChatGPT also pulls information on the web and uses generative AI to create responses. Now, as we know, in terms of what's within the World Wide Web, there's a lot of content, and arguably there's a lot of inappropriate and even toxic content, and there's a lot of lowest common denominator activities as well as content that's going on in there. So when you're focusing on an area like that's general lifestyle or even things like travel or food, I think scoping the web's okay. But when you're looking at kind of wisdom and practices, you really need what we call SLM, which is a small language model, where less is more, where you actually have a pure land or safe garden of wisdom holders that provide these information, whether it's in video, audio format, or picture or text format, that is of high quality, as well as really screen out all the toxic material. Because when you think about it, garbage in, garbage out, right? That's the normal rule. And so if you have a content that's vertical, shall we say, that's specialized, and then you've got a community that's looking for inner practice and asking questions related to that, so the answers you get is actually quite higher quality, which is our experience. After working on it for less than a year and a half, actually, when you look at the responses that Compassion GPT generates, and it has a function where you compare the same question with results with ChatGPT, you realize the relevance and also the quality of the content is very, very refined to a higher level. So that's where technology, especially really careful design up in the very beginning, can actually build a very strong foundation for these kinds of positive social change.
So you mentioned service-based and your work there. We had the pleasure of talking also with Nipun in an earlier episode. So for you listeners, if that sparked some interest around service-based and what they are up to and this compassion, approaching AI and these tools from a compassionate standpoint, do check out that episode. And Victor, you also mentioned in your response the strategic focus of Tianren Culture around one wisdom and one health. And so I'm curious to hear more about what that means, and if you can provide an example of how you all approach this through your efforts and its impact.
Sure, Kimberly. So Tianren Culture is aiming to address worldwide wellness in a holistic way. So with one wisdom, and it's really focused on contemplative wisdom and practices, really addressing the inner aspects, such as mental, emotional, and even spiritual wellness. And one health, which works on diet and food system change, addresses physical health, as what we put inside our body is shown to be the leading root cause of the key acute and chronic diseases, as well as the major leading causes of death, actually. In other words, one wisdom addresses the mind, heart, and spirit, whereas one health addresses the body, which is interconnected with the inner aspects of ourselves as well. So as an example, you asked, for wisdom, we support scientific and social science research on contemplative wisdom and practices with leading universities like Stanford, Berkeley, and so forth. And then communicating the key insights and findings from areas of research like breath work or like nature-based contemplative practices, because these are areas that we've, through our scoping study, found out there has not been a lot of scientific research and communication, unlike areas like mindfulness or Vipassana, for example, which has a lot more. We also help communities to discover and navigate wisdom practice and service teachings, as well as find teachers, for example, through Compassion GPT, as well as all the wisdom holders and partners on the content side that we work with. To give another example, is actually an interfaith platform called Buddha as a Gas Pump, which is a very interesting name. While it's Buddha, actually it's an interfaith. It covers all different kinds of religion and have both wisdom teachers of different faiths, as well as scientific research, as well as practitioners that have actually had remarkable experience through their spiritual journey. And because there's it's been going on for about 15 plus years with over 700 interviews and all kinds of these knowledgeable people providing 2 to 3 hour long video interviews, as well as in many cases they provide the content of the teachings as well. You can imagine how rich that library is, and combine that with Compassion GPT backend technology and the product interface it has really artfully put together. It really becomes a very lively platform where people can ask questions. And in the future, even like-minded people can potentially connect to build communities around their different practices and wisdom beliefs. And besides that, the last area that we're really working on is offering online as well as offline workshops. And we've decided, because it's a very high-touch thing to set up these workshops, so we really focus on social change makers. And so we're working with networks around the world, like Senegos, as well as Garrison Institute, as well as Conscious Food System Alliance, and the multiple of these social change networks for funders as well as NGO leaders who face this very complex social change environment and often have a lot of kind of pressures on their jobs in terms of their lifestyles. So how do you improve their lifestyles as well as help them really increase compassion and wisdom. So they can actually benefit more people and really craft their social work a lot more artfully. So we consider these are social multipliers. So if you can actually elevate the consciousness and improve the well-being of this key constituencies, the quality of the work that they do in the world will have very wide rippling effects.
So, Victor, let me ask you this. You have previously shared with me and Nipun and others, that, when reflecting on your analysis work with startups, that we seldom look inside and ask our inner voices or our intuition, and instead rely so much on thinking and analysis and not enough on being and really asking our inner voice, or at least attending to that. And in entrepreneurship, typically entrepreneurs and investors and others in the field tend to largely rely on data, thinking, and less on that inner voice or that inner teacher. So let me ask you this. Why is it important to tap into our inner voice being, and what does it enable us to access and do regarding our work in business?
That's actually a very important question that you just asked, Stephen. Let me just preface that by a little bit in terms of, we talk about the polycrisis that we're all facing. And what's interesting is we like it looking at root causes of problems rather than just the symptoms. And when you look at all the issues that people are talking about, mental health crisis, zoonotic diseases, geopolitical conflicts, as well as climate change, all these areas appear to be very different at the surface level. But at its core, it's really lack of human consciousness in terms of how we think about the wisdom and really the disconnection. So mental health crisis is a disconnection to our own inner self. Geopolitical conflicts, as well as actually all these inequities in the world, are really disconnection to each other. And then lack of understanding of the idea of Ubuntu, for example, that we're all interconnected as one. Mistreatment of animals, which is really causing, in terms of factory farming, all these animals in very small cages, as well as very enclosed environments that create, even flu, COVID, all these zoonotic diseases is really human cause. And of course, climate change is our extractive view of the natural environment, right? So we're not looking at the environment in a sustainable way. It's our disconnection to the environment. But all this is really based on a lack of human awareness as well as wisdom. And that's why going inner, like you described, is very, very important. And I would consider that in modern society, there's a lot, arguably, way too much thinking and doing, and not enough feeling and being, and which includes kind of the connection to our inner voice and intuition, really. So as we discussed, social issues are inherently highly complex. Now, thinking analysis does help to break a problem down to its components, which can help to a certain extent. But over-reliance, which is often the case, or too much thinking and doing without looking at these problems in a holistic way, often lead us down the wrong path, actually. And that may appear efficient in the short term, but actually unwise or create unintended consequences, and other problems may surface in the medium long term. So by giving ourselves space, even sometimes silence and stillness, which in the modern world is almost a little bit foreign to a lot of people, gets us in touch with our inner self. Inner knowing, shall we say, that may often come with creative ideas as well as true solutions. I practice 2 hours plus per day in a variety of breath work, meditation, other kinds of movement practices. And personally, I found that the ideas and solutions that comes in these times are actually much superior to the things I do after a long period of analysis. So as you've gained experience, obviously you do want to go to the external environment to ask a lot of questions and do the analysis. But always I come back to the inner voice, your intuition, that actually help you to connect the dots, really look at things in a holistic way, you sometimes found that your perspective actually changes. And often this is a much better really approach. And I call this a capability, almost even a superpower that can be accessed, practiced, and enhanced over time.
So it's not an either or, it's a both and, but because we have not spent as much time cultivating that inner wisdom and consciousness, we need to do more there.
That's right. Mm-hmm. It's not or, but at the same time, because modern society is by far majority on one side, there needs to be a balance. Right. I think it would even be nice to say right now is 90-10%.
Yeah.
Right. And I would say that, you can start with 20% inner, but I actually probably do 50-50. And when you do that, I always start with the outer first, but the final decision don't get made until I do the inner work. Mm. And I find that to be kind of the best path forward.
Wow, this is fascinating conversation, Victor. We're going to move into our resource roundup. And here, we typically explore various resources and practical tools and tips that will equip and support underrepresented entrepreneurs as you build your business. And so, Victor, we want to start with this first question, really a continuation of the previous question, which is to say that meditation is one thing that you've said that you wish you had known before you started a company. And now it is a practice that you engage in daily. For entrepreneurs who desire to explore meditation as a daily practice, can you share resources that you have found to be beneficial that would help a beginner in this work?
Well, Stephen, there's a lot of paths and resource options available now. First, we need to understand that meditation can be a rather personal thing, depending on your personality and lifestyle. So I would start by identifying and then seek support from families and friends that have a daily practice already, because especially those who know and understand you. So with that kind of background, they can provide you more personalized suggestions and advice. Okay. Secondly, it's important for beginners to understand that there are actually different entry points for meditation or contemplative practices in general, that can also be personalized. Things like breath through the nose, sound through the ear, sight through the eyes, overall body, heart, nature. These are all entry points. Now, actually, mindfulness and the mind, which is by far the most prevalent in the secular world right now, arguably is not the easiest entry point, because a lot of us in the modern society, including myself when I started to practice, have a monkey mind that jumps around a lot. And the idea of really reducing your thinking is rather difficult for a lot of people in the beginning. So actually, I would suggest balance that approach with other entry points that I described before. So in terms of tools, actually quite a bit. I mean, there are a lot of meditation apps that's Calm, that's Headspace, Healthy Minds, Waking Up, which are all good for guided meditation. And that's probably good for beginner based on these different groupings I talked about. But very quickly, I found myself liking unguided meditation, and I generally use Insight Timer for that. But we want to go deeper. And some people, even when they are beginner, they actually identify teachers, whether it's practice teachers like breathwork teachers or mantra-based like TM, Transcendental Meditation teachers, because sound's actually a good entry point. And then some others, because of their own spiritual practice, spiritual teachers, which really combines contemplative practices with wisdom, which actually sometimes go hand in hand. And there are also retreat centers, the 10-day Vipassana retreats, as well as retreat centers like Spirit Rock in the West Coast, Garrison Institute in the East Coast, and other parts of the world too. I mean, there are all kinds of different retreat centers that is always good sometimes to kind of deep dive in the early part of your journey.
That's really instructive. And I love how you said to start off with really touching base or reaching out to people who we're connected to, who practice meditation for insight, given that they know us and our personalities and our being really have implications for the type of meditation that might benefit us most. And I don't feel like I really hear that very often anywhere, typically people go straight to, oh, these mindfulness practices. Oh, I have to stop thinking in order to, be present with myself. But there's so, like you said, there's so many aspects of it and avenues that could be most fitting for people based on how their personality and characteristics and who they are. So thank you for that.
Yeah, actually, Kimberly, that's an important point, because when I first started, I actually tried different practices and realized some actually fit me and then others less so. And I've seen a lot of people around me that does exactly what you did describe, which is teach or certain practice without exploring. They just kind of went into it. And if you're lucky, it matches is great. And sometimes not so aligned, then they drop the practice thinking it's too hard. But once you go through the hurdle, you start to really get the benefits. And then you realize that you think it takes up a lot of time. It actually saves you time. And over time, you actually, because I started really 5-10 minutes and then go to 20 minutes. And when I say 2 hours, people think, oh, wow, that's so formidable. But just, that takes a while to get there. But you realize that after you do that 2 hours, the rest of the day, your work's done almost. What people don't realize, you get your work, you used to have to spend hours analyzing these things, right? And especially breath work. In meditation, you're supposed to try not to think so much or follow your thoughts. But things like breath work that allows free association. I come up with my best ideas, and then sometimes a lot of solutions just kind of came up during that period. And all I have to do is write that down. And the rest of the day, it's actually really easy. So that kind of flips the agenda around if you really understand these practices and what actually can do in terms of awareness, creativity, wisdom, and just really superpowers.
I would love to talk about that more, but I know.
But I figure how to save you time. You're able to come up with solutions quicker, or you're able to pinpoint where you actually need to spend your time and energy. That's really great.
I'll give you one more example. I used to, when I was in the startup, like in the evening when I'm stuck in a problem, I maybe spend an hour or two and then have to get to bed. Now I know that because I can, in the morning, after you've had a great night's sleep, and then your mind kind of defragments, using a technology term. It's like the river, all these noises kind of sinks down, and you've got these clean space. And that clean space allow you to connect the dots. And some people, like when you're on a walk and when you're taking a shower, you come up with the best ideas. In the morning, during breath work, that's when I get my best ideas, because your mind is clear. And sometimes all these things that when you're analyzing, they don't come to you because there's too many facts in there, right? And your mind is so busy, right? And you turn it around, actually you clear your mind. That's where the greatest insights come out.
That is so valuable. Well, I personally would love to stay here. I'm going to move on to it and shift to another question. So earlier you talked about really how you approach social impact and some really kind of crucial things to be thinking about. So for social entrepreneurs who are starting their businesses, what are key elements that they should prioritize when really thinking about truly being impactful to our communities and our environment?
I think a couple of things. Clear purpose and intentions, what social issue is being addressed, what is this being addressed for. I think that's something that really needs to be well considered. Also, first principles or root causes, because you rather to want to prevent something versus actually, if you look at a lot of social work and philanthropy, a lot of it is addressed to what I call last mile problems, really therapeutics. Because they are often too late, and the problem becomes so escalated that they're really disasters or emergencies. And by that time, you have to move a lot of resources. You don't have a lot of time, and the outcome generally is not so good, right? But I guess for a lot of people, the ability to want to save something, I think, is a natural instinct. But I think it's better if you can prevent something, then there's nothing to be saved. So I think that's another thing. And similarly, because I think there's also a natural tendency and maybe borrow from the private sector to look at things like impact, like you described. And I think it's natural to do that. And you should really monitor that. But when in the designing phase, I think it's more important to think about your seed or your intention, shall we say, and who you're working with, ecosystem, the partners, and how you monitor the process. So because these social issues are so complex, you don't know what's going to happen. You're trying to define a lot of these results and measurement and impact. Sometimes it's almost, I would say, fictional or kind of imagined, because you find that there's going to be a lot of turns that comes up with something very, very different from what you expected. And so really the idea of emergence, which I've learned from great partners too, because I also came in this with a very, very much a planned top-down kind of model in the private sector, which I found to be really not that effective in the public sector because of the complexity. Just to give an example, in the private sector, the measures are clear, and they're usually one or two. But the public sector, there's really no clear measure, and there's a broad spectrum of things, and there's all kinds of externalities and unintended consequences that is really in a bundle. And so that's why it's a very kind of different emerging approach that we found to be a lot more effective.
Victor, what are one or two go-to resources, whether it be online communities or books, that you would recommend early stage social entrepreneurs explore to build their business?
Well, I think there are general information, but I would say that, once you have an intention about what area you look at, I seriously really we talk about scoping study. I cannot really talk about how important that is. And that's kind of fundamentally research on the purpose area to understand and describe kind of the state of affairs in that area of purpose. And I would actually even interview the key constituencies, the funders, the NGOs, the researchers, and so forth. If you want some general tips, I think the Stanford Social Innovation Review is pretty good. Because it's looking at social issues in a more innovative and non-traditional way. So those are some things to keep in mind.
It's great. It's a wealth of resources that you've offered here.
Definitely. And for you all who are listening in, we hope that you are being inspired by this conversation, that it is thought-provoking. And we want to continue to support you on your entrepreneurial journey, even beyond this podcast. So you could go to dogetx.org, where we provide resources, and you can join a community of like-minded entrepreneurs. But now we are going to shift to our last segment, Off the Cuff, and we have a series of questions that we have not provided Victor with. And we just want you, Victor, to just say what comes and speaks to you first as we ask you these questions. So I'll just go ahead and get us started. What has been the greatest lesson so far on your entrepreneurial journey?
I assume you're talking about my social entrepreneur journey. Actually, it's really going back to the intention, the seed being the most important, because if that is right, whatever emerges will follow. If it's not pure, unfortunately, things will deteriorate.
What is one of your superpowers or gift that you, Victor, bring to the world?
I guess with all these contemplative practices, the ability to connect the dots. That's something in the private sector, that a skill that I've gained on the dark side, which actually still continues to be, very, very important, plus is now enhanced with these contemplative practices.
What is one piece of technology that has been a game changer for you personally or for your business?
The technology of silence and stillness.
How much of your success do you attribute to your faith or spirituality or practice versus your own grit, will, or hustle?
I would say inner practices and the wisdom that derives.
Complete this sentence. Because of my entrepreneurial endeavors, communities will be or are more able to
be shared with joy, wisdom, and heart.
Well, Victor, we'll have to leave it there. And I want to thank you so much for taking time out of your schedule to share deep wisdom and about the kinds of ways in which consciousness and contemplation and silence are important to the social entrepreneur on their journey for creating the social impact that they want to do in the world. So thank you.
Thank you. And thank you for the podcast.
It's a gift. We appreciate you. All right. So that was a wonderful episode. It really was.
So much to explore if we had even more time, but yes.
Yes, so much more to explore. But you know what, Stephen, I want to ask you, maybe we'll explore that another time, but in this current moment, I want to hear from you. What do you hope to see happen in the field of entrepreneurship, especially social entrepreneurship, in the coming years? I mean, I think that's a good question to kind of dig into, especially after this conversation that we had with Victor.
Yeah, it's a good question. I think what I would like to see is more people have the resources, the inner resources, as well as the external resources and support to really make the kind of impact that they want to have in their communities beyond just generating revenue. How do we actually change lives and make our communities a better place and really inspire a more hopeful future? And my hope is that, that social entrepreneurs are first line responders to the kind of tough social challenges and problems that our communities face, and that with the right kind of resources, inner and outer, that they can really make the kind of impact that make people's lives better, that improve our environment, that generate the types of resources to create the future that I think we all long for. And so I would love to see that. And I would think the other thing that I would say is that I would love to see more people engage in social entrepreneurship, and particularly first-time social entrepreneurs, underrepresented entrepreneurs. I would love to see more people of color to have access to the kind of resources, to have the kind of impact that they want to have in their communities and the communities that they're accountable to. And I think, the more that we do that, then all of us win, that the rising tide of diverse entrepreneurs working throughout the globe and within our communities improves the overall ecosystem of people who are trying to do good in the world.
Wonderfully stated. Well, I hope that's the future that we can live into. And we're trying to really kind of carve that out in our own little area of the world here with Do Good X. And there are many other organizations who are working with social entrepreneurs or creating the resources for that impact to happen as well. So if you are tuning in and you aspire to be a social entrepreneur, or you are early in the game, you know that your work is needed,
That's right.
Your work is necessary. If you're a supporter or an investor in the work of social impact, thank you for the ways in which you are supporting entrepreneurs and really to make our communities thrive and to make our environment sustainable for all of us. Thank you for joining us, and we hope that you join us again in the next episode. Until then, be well and do good.
Thank you for listening to the Do Good X podcast. To continue the conversation or access our resources, visit www.dogoodx.org. Join us again for conversations that will nourish your soul, ignite your dreams, and empower you to build an impactful business, one intentional step at a time. Until then, keep striving, thriving, and doing good.